My husband's funeral should have been sacred. Instead, my son brought his new girlfriend, whose eyes scanned the room like she was shopping for real estate. Days later, he was at my door, pushing for details about my late husband's money. I just smiled, listened, and secretly held on to a secret worth millions they knew nothing about. This is my story. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The silence in the house was a heavy shroud, far more suffocating than the black dress Eleanor Vance still wore. 3 days after Arthur's funeral. 42 years they had been together, a tapestry woven with quiet joys, shared burdens, and an unwavering, understated love. Now, he was gone, and the world felt muted. A watercolor painting stripped of its vibrant hues. The grief was a constant ache, a phantom limb that throbbed with every memory of his laugh, his gentle touch, the way he always knew exactly how she took her tea. The funeral itself had been a blur of condolences and hushed whispers, punctuated by one discordant note. Her son, Michael, and his new girlfriend, Savannah. Eleanor hadn't met Savannah before, but her arrival had been anything but subtle. Dressed in something far too flashy for a somber occasion, Savannah had flitted through the gathering, offering superficial smiles and an unnervingly direct gaze that seemed to linger not on Eleanor or Arthur's grieving family, but on the antique furniture, the artwork, the very structure of the home. Her condolences had been perfunctory, a rehearsed script delivered with an almost performative sincerity that grated on Eleanor's raw nerves. There was a cold, assessing glint in Savannah's eyes that Eleanor couldn't shake. Today, however, the world had been jolted back into sharp, bewildering focus. Mr. Davies, Arthur's longtime, impeccably discreet lawyer, had called her in. The heavy oak door of his office had closed behind her, muffling the city's clamor, creating a bubble of solemn anticipation. He had offered his condolences again, genuine ones this time, before getting straight to business. "Eleanor," he began, his voice soft. Arthur was a remarkably private man. As you know, he handled most of the family finances himself, preferring to keep the details close to his chest. Eleanor nodded, remembering Arthur's quiet aversion to discussing money, beyond ensuring their comfort. They had lived a modest, comfortable life in their suburban home, never wanting for anything, but certainly not flaunting wealth. Mr. Davies then cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. Arthur had a very substantial portfolio. In his will, he explicitly left his entire estate to you. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The total value, including investments, properties, and various holdings, comes to just over $8 million. Eleanor stared. $8 million. The number seemed to hover in the air like an impossible, shimmering mirage. Her Arthur? The man who clipped coupons and repaired their leaky faucet himself, who preferred quiet evenings at home to lavish dinners, who drove a sensible sedan until it practically fell apart. He had been sitting on $8 million? She felt a wave of dizziness. It wasn't just the sheer sum, but the profound secrecy that stunned her. Arthur had always been honest with her, or so she had believed. This felt like a secret kept, not out of malice, but out of some deep-seated, protective instinct she had never fully understood. $8 million, she finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper. But he never said anything. Mr. Davies offered a sympathetic smile. He simply said he wanted to ensure your complete financial security. He was very clear about that. It's all legally sound, of course. He pushed a thick stack of documents across the polished desk. There's no rush to make any decisions, Eleanor. Take your time to absorb all of this. We can discuss options when you're ready. Leaving Mr. Davies' office, the city outside felt brighter, louder, strangely distorted. $8 million. It was a weight, a monumental responsibility, and a bewildering legacy. Back in the quiet sanctuary of her home, the documents lay on her dining table, a stark testament to Arthur's hidden life. Her mind, still reeling from the shock, began to make unsettling connections. Michael, just a few weeks before Arthur passed, Michael had called, asking unusually specific questions about Arthur's life insurance policies. He had even inquired about the house's maintenance, pressing for details about potential repairs and their costs. At the time, Eleanor had dismissed it as Michael simply being concerned. But now, the memory of those questions intertwined with Savannah's calculating gaze at the funeral. A prickle of unease started to spread through her. Was it possible that Michael had suspected something, or was this just a typical son's concern, now amplified by her newfound knowledge? The answer arrived with an insistent knock on her front door, followed almost immediately by the sound of the lock clicking open. Michael. He had always kept a spare key, a habit she had never questioned until now. He strode in, his usual boisterous energy subdued by a faux solemnity that Eleanor found immediately grating. "Mom," he said, moving toward her, his eyes scanning the room as Savannah's had at the funeral. "Just checking in. How are you holding up?" Before she could fully respond, his gaze fell on the stack of legal papers on the dining table. Her heart lurched. She hadn't put them away, still too stunned to even think clearly. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp, devoid of any pretense of concern. He moved closer to the table, his hand reaching out. Eleanor instinctively stepped forward, blocking his view, her hand covering the top document. "Just some old bills," she said, feigning a casualness she didn't feel. "Estate things. You know how Arthur was with his paperwork." "Oh, right," Michael said, though his eyes narrowed. "Any word on the life insurance?" "Dad had a few policies, didn't he? We should make sure you get all of that sorted out." Eleanor felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. He was remarkably direct. Too direct. "Oh, I'm not sure, dear. Mr. Davies mentioned a few things, but I haven't really looked. It's all a bit much right now." She tried to sound vague, overwhelmed. "Honestly, Michael, my head is still spinning. Well, Savannah could help." He pressed, undeterred. "She's got a lot of experience with estates, legal stuff. Her last boyfriend, his family had quite a bit of property. She knows how to navigate all that." The mention of Savannah sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. She pictured Savannah's sharp, assessing eyes, then looked at Michael. She saw it there too. Then a flicker of the same calculating hunger, barely veiled beneath his manufactured concern. It was a look that spoke of entitlement, of expectation, of a future already mapped out in his mind, with her money playing a central role. "That's very kind of her," Eleanor replied, her voice carefully neutral. "But Mr. Davies is handling everything. He's been Arthur's lawyer for years. I trust him completely." She picked up the stack of documents, cradling them protectively in her arms, as if they were fragile, precious secrets. "I think I just need some time to myself right now, darling. It's all still so fresh." Michael lingered for a few more minutes, making platitudes, but his gaze kept returning to where the documents had been. Eleanor watched him, a chill spreading through her. $8 million, a secret Arthur had kept, perhaps for this very reason, a secret she now knew, and one she realized, with a growing sense of certainty, she would have to guard with her life. Keeping the inheritance a secret wasn't just about protecting Arthur's legacy. It was about protecting herself. The weeks that followed Arthur's funeral settled into an unsettling pattern. Michael and Savannah became almost constant fixtures, their visits increasingly frequent and, to Eleanor's discerning eye, alarmingly calculated. They never seemed to drop by spontaneously, just to share a cup of tea and reminisce about Arthur. Instead, each arrival felt purposeful, their pleasantries a flimsy veil over an unspoken agenda. They'd bring small, insignificant gifts, a potted plant, a box of artisanal cookies. But the gestures felt hollow, mere props in a carefully staged performance. Every single conversation, no matter how it began, invariably found its way back to two recurring themes: Eleanor's finances and the big house. "Mom, this place is quite a responsibility, isn't it?" Michael would start, gazing around their comfortable, 5-bedroom home, as if it were an aging mansion requiring an army of staff. "Are you really sure you're up to keeping up with all the maintenance?" Eleanor would offer a placid smile. "Arthur always took care of everything, dear. And I'm quite capable. Thank you." But Michael wasn't easily deterred. "But what about your budget, Mom? With Dad gone, are you sure you have enough to cover everything?" Property taxes alone on a place like this. He'd trail off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. She couldn't manage. He even went so far as to suggest, quite casually, that perhaps it was time to downsize. You know, a nice cozy condo, Mom. Something more manageable for just one person. Think of the freedom. The word freedom felt like a thinly disguised euphemism for less expense and fewer assets for you to control. Savannah, meanwhile, had her own repertoire of manipulative tactics. Her favorite seemed to be the saga of her grandmother's financial struggles. "My poor grandma," she'd lament, usually while running a finger over a polished antique or admiring a painting on the wall. She was just so trusting, you know. After Grandpa passed, she lost everything, made some really terrible decisions. Invested in a scheme that sounded too good to be true. And guess what? It was. Eleanor would nod politely, sipping her tea. But a tiny, persistent voice in her head had started to question the very existence of this ill-fated grandmother. Savannah's stories were so frequent, so vivid, and so perfectly tailored to instill fear about financial mismanagement that they began to sound less like cautionary tales and more like carefully constructed fables. Had this grandmother truly existed, or was she a convenient fictional device, summoned whenever Savannah needed to underscore Eleanor's supposed vulnerability? After their visits, an unsettling silence would descend upon the house, broken only by Eleanor's quiet footsteps as she moved from room to room, checking the locks. She found herself double-checking the back door, ensuring the windows were latched, a habit she'd never had before Arthur's passing. The feeling of unease that settled over her after they left was palpable. A cold, insidious dread that made her question not only Michael's intentions, but her own safety. Savannah's narrative continued to unfold, her stories growing more pointed. "It's just so common, you know," she'd remark, her voice dripping with faux empathy. "Older people, especially when they're grieving, they're so susceptible. They make rash decisions, give away their money, sign things without really understanding. Without proper guidance, it's a recipe for disaster." Eleanor, listening intently, noticed how every anecdote, every sympathetic sigh, seemed meticulously designed to chip away at her confidence, to make her doubt her own competence and capacity for independent decision-making. The subtext was always the same. You are vulnerable. You are incapable. You need someone to manage your affairs, and we are those someones. Their concern, which initially might have passed for genuine worry in another context, now felt transparently like prying. They weren't checking on her emotional well-being. They were meticulously gauging her financial situation, trying to find weaknesses, openings, ways to insert themselves into her affairs. They'd ask about specific assets. "That big stock portfolio Dad had. Mom, is that still active?" Michael would inquire, attempting to sound casual. "Or did Mr. Davies help you liquidate it?" Eleanor remained steadfast in her vagueness. "Oh, Arthur handled all of that," she'd say, a stock phrase that served her well. "Mr. Davies is looking over everything. I'm just trying to get through each day." "Really?" She'd sigh dramatically, feigning a grief-stricken distraction, hoping to convey that she was too overwhelmed to delve into details. It was a performance, one she was growing increasingly adept at, and one that was becoming exhausting. She knew, with chilling clarity, that she absolutely could not reveal the existence of the $8 million. Not to them. The pressure, though subtle, was mounting. Their questions became more direct, less veiled. They'd ask about the house's value, about Arthur's pension, about any specific investments they recalled him mentioning years ago. It was a slow, relentless tightening of a net, and Eleanor felt herself growing more and more wary, the secret inheritance burning a quiet hole in her awareness, a crucial weapon she was determined to keep hidden. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, cloaked in the deceptive hum of a kitchen conversation. Eleanor had retreated to the sunroom, ostensibly to tend to her herbs, but mostly to escape the stifling presence of Michael and Savannah, who had once again arrived unannounced. She heard their voices drift from the kitchen, low and conspiratorial, believing the closed door and the gentle gurgle of the fish tank would mask their words. But the acoustics of the old house, combined with the rising inflection of Savannah's voice, betrayed them. "Honestly, Michael," Your mother is such a closed book, Savannah complained, her tone edged with impatience. What is she playing at? Arthur must have left her something decent, right? I mean, all those years in finance, living in this big house, old people always squirrel away something. Eleanor's grip tightened on the watering can. Old people. The phrase stung, not just for its ageism, but for the callous disregard it implied. Michael's voice, a little less confident, drifted next. I don't know, Sav. She's being really cagey. Just keep saying Mr. Davies is handling everything. But she has to have something. Exactly. Savannah pounced. And she needs guidance. She'll just sit on it, or worse, make some stupid mistake. That money should be helping us too. I mean, the wedding alone is going to be a fortune, and a down payment for our own place. Do you have any idea how much she's just sitting on? Eleanor's blood ran cold. The sheer audacity of their conversation, the blatant discussion of her money as their entitlement, was a punch to the gut. They were not just speculating. They were strategizing. They were planning. Her anger, usually a slow, simmering heat, flared into a controlled inferno. She took a deep breath, pushing the surge of fury down, plastering a benign smile on her face before pushing open the sunroom door and stepping into the kitchen. Michael and Savannah immediately fell silent, their faces shifting from conspiratorial greed to startled innocence. Eleanor feigned ignorance, casually remarking, "Just watering my tomatoes, dear. They're growing so well." Savannah, recovering quickly, beamed. "Mom, we have exciting news. We're getting married." The announcement was delivered with a theatrical flourish, as if it were a grand surprise, rather than the topic Eleanor had just overheard them discussing in mercenary terms. "It's going to be so expensive these days, isn't it?" she added, her eyes darting to Eleanor, clearly testing the waters. "Oh, how wonderful, dears," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you both." She turned to Michael, her gaze unwavering. "Speaking of expenses, Michael, you mentioned Arthur's savings accounts the other day. Mr. Davies assured me everything is secure and accounted for. There's nothing for you to worry about." It was a firm, unmistakable boundary, subtly but definitively drawn. A flash of something dangerous passed between Michael and Savannah. A fleeting look of frustration, perhaps even resentment, a silent communication of their thwarted plans. Eleanor saw it, acknowledged it, and filed it away. That night, Eleanor moved with a quiet resolve. She retrieved Arthur's old metal safe, long tucked away in the back of his closet, a relic she hadn't touched in years. With careful hands, she placed the thick stack of legal documents detailing her $8 million inheritance inside, clicked the heavy lock shut, and hid the key in a place only she knew. It was a symbolic act, a silent declaration that she would protect what was hers, what Arthur had entrusted to her, from these encroaching vultures. A few weeks later, an elaborately embossed wedding invitation arrived. It was a multi-page affair, detailing a lavish affair at a prestigious country club, complete with a gourmet menu and an open bar. The sheer opulence of it, given Michael's relatively modest income, only fueled Eleanor's suspicions. They clearly expected someone else to foot a significant portion of the bill. The wedding day itself was a grand spectacle. Savannah, radiant in a designer gown, looked every inch the society bride. Michael, beaming beside her, seemed to float on a cloud of newfound importance. Throughout the reception, Eleanor found herself the target of a subtle but relentless campaign. Savannah would sidle up to her, martini in hand, and remark, "Oh, Mom, this venue is just stunning, isn't it? But the cost. You wouldn't believe it." Michael would follow suit, complaining about the price of their dream honeymoon or hinting about the financial strain of starting fresh. Eleanor, maintaining a serene smile, politely declined to help. "Oh, dears, I'm so sorry. But you know I'm on a fixed income now. Retirement, you see. I have to be very careful with what Arthur left me to make it last." The lie felt bitter on her tongue, but necessary. Each refusal, each mention of her fixed income, visibly irritated them. Their smiles would tighten, their eyes hardening for a fraction of a second before they remembered their audience. As the reception drew to a close and guests began to thin out, Savannah approached Eleanor, her smile fixed, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Mom," she began, looping her arm through Eleanor's. "Michael and I have been talking. We're so excited to start our life together, but this housing market." She sighed dramatically. "We were hoping you might consider investing in Michael's happiness, if you know what I mean. A little help with a down payment on a beautiful home, it would mean the world to us." Eleanor gently disentangled her arm. She looked Savannah directly in the eye, her own gaze calm and resolute. "Savannah, dear, I believe young couples should build their own foundations. It makes the home and the marriage so much stronger when you've earned it yourselves." Savannah's perfectly painted smile faltered, a crack appearing in her carefully constructed facade. The predatory gleam in her eyes became undeniable. Eleanor knew then, with absolute certainty, that the battle for Arthur's legacy and her own peace had only just begun. A month after Michael and Savannah returned from their lavish honeymoon, the calls began. They started subtly, a tentative request for immediate financial assistance, always accompanied by a manufactured crisis. First, it was a sudden, urgent car repair Michael desperately needed to get to a job interview. "Just 500. Mom. To get me on my feet." Eleanor, ever the mother, albeit a wary one, sent him the money. It was a small sum, but it served its purpose. It confirmed her growing instincts about their true motivations. The gratitude was brief, almost perfunctory, before the next crisis inevitably materialized. As Eleanor began to say no, citing her fixed income and the need to be prudent, Michael's tone shifted. The polite requests morphed into demands, laced with resentment. "Mom, why are you being so difficult?" he'd snap, his voice tight with frustration. "Dad would have helped us. He always looked out for me. He wouldn't want you to hoard everything." The accusation stung, yet it also sharpened Eleanor's resolve. Arthur wouldn't have wanted her to be a financial target. Then came the crucial slip. During one particularly heated phone call, where Michael was pleading for funds to invest in a dubious business venture, he blurted out, "You're sitting in a paid-off house with Dad's life insurance money, Mom. What's the big deal?" Eleanor's blood ran cold. She had never, not once, mentioned any life insurance money to Michael or Savannah. She had deliberately been vague about Arthur's estate, only ever confirming that Mr. Davies was handling everything. How could he know? The answer hit her with chilling clarity. Savannah. Her research, her experience with estates, her manipulative stories about vulnerable grandmothers. It was all coming together. Savannah had been digging, perhaps even accessing old documents or conversations. Her coaching of Michael was becoming overtly, dangerously, obvious. 6 months after the wedding, the pressure escalated dramatically. Eleanor answered a knock on her door to find Michael and Savannah standing there, their smiles disturbingly bright, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man carrying a briefcase. "Mom," Michael announced, pushing past her into the hallway. "This is Mr. Wells, a notary public. He's here to help us sort things out." Eleanor felt an immediate knot of dread in her stomach. "Sort what out, Michael?" she asked, her voice betraying none of her mounting apprehension. "Your finances, Mom," Savannah interjected, stepping forward, her eyes gleaming with an uncharacteristic intensity. "We're worried about you. You're vulnerable. We've been doing some research, and we think it's time to set up a living trust. With Michael as trustee, of course. It's for your own protection, to prevent elder financial abuse." The words were delivered with a practiced ease, a performance honed for this very moment. Eleanor listened, her mind racing. Elder financial abuse. The irony was almost laughable. They weren't protecting her. They were attempting to become the abusers themselves. A living trust, with Michael as trustee, would effectively give him power of attorney, complete control over her assets. Her house, Arthur's hidden millions. Everything would be theirs to manage, and inevitably, to spend. Mr. Wells, a stoic man with kind eyes, stepped forward, offering a professional, if somewhat uncomfortable, smile. "Mrs. Vance, we have the documents here. It's a standard living trust agreement, designed to ensure your assets are managed according to your wishes and to avoid probate. He gestured towards the papers spread on her dining table, a thick stack of legalese. Eleanor walked slowly to the table, her gaze sweeping over the documents. She picked up the pen they offered her, feeling the cold weight of it in her hand. Then, she slowly placed it back down. "I appreciate your concern, dears," she said, her voice calm and firm, looking directly at Michael and Savannah. "But I think I need some time to consult my own financial advisor, Mr. Davies. Before I sign anything so significant." The mask slipped. Michael's face contorted with anger, a flash of red spreading across his cheeks. Savannah's bright smile vanished, replaced by a thin, cruel line. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Michael exploded. "Mr. Wells is here now. It's all straightforward. What's there to consult? We're trying to help you. Help me, or help yourselves," Eleanor retorted, her gaze unwavering. "How much do you think I'm worth, Michael? Is it enough to buy you a new car, a house, or perhaps just a fancy lifestyle?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory, exposing their true intentions for all to see. Michael stammered, his face blanching, while Savannah glared, her eyes full of venom. "This is outrageous," Savannah spat. "We're your family, and I'm your mother," Eleanor replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I expect respect, not manipulation. Now, I believe it's time for you and Mr. Wells to leave." She pointed towards the door, her stance unyielding. "I will not be signing these documents today, or any other day, without my own counsel." Michael and Savannah exchanged furious glances, defeated for the moment. With a curt nod to Eleanor, Mr. Wells gathered his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama. They left in a huff, the front door slamming shut behind them, leaving Eleanor trembling but resolute. She knew this wouldn't be the end. They would try again. That evening, Eleanor called Mr. Davies. She recounted the entire incident, from Michael's slip about the life insurance money to the notary public's visit, emphasizing that she had not, under any circumstances, revealed the existence of her $8 million inheritance. Mr. Davies listened patiently, then assured her he would ensure her legal protections were ironclad. "The story isn't over yet, and you won't want to miss what happens next. If you're finding this tale gripping, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to stay updated. Your support means the world, and it helps me continue sharing these personal stories." 3 weeks after the disastrous notary incident, the doorbell rang, a hesitant, almost fragile sound. Eleanor opened it to find Michael standing on her porch, alone. He looked utterly disheveled, his usual carefully maintained appearance replaced by rumpled clothes, shadowed eyes, and a palpable air of desperation. His shoulders slumped, and his face was etched with a profound weariness Eleanor hadn't seen since he was a troubled teenager. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper. Eleanor stepped aside, a pang of maternal instinct warring with the lingering resentment from their recent encounters. She led him to the living room, offering him a cup of tea, which he declined, his hands trembling slightly. He sat on the edge of the sofa, avoiding her gaze. Finally, he looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. "Mom, Savannah and we're in serious trouble. Deep trouble." He took a shaky breath. "We owe over $60,000, maxed out all our credit cards, the wedding, the honeymoon, trying to keep up appearances. It's all just spiraled out of control." He buried his face in his hands. "I'm drowning, Mom. We're drowning." Eleanor listened, her expression carefully neutral. Part of her, the mother who had nursed him through scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks, wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but the other part, the woman who had endured their manipulative ploys and calculated greed, remained guarded. He was asking for help, assuming, she knew, that Arthur had left her maybe $50,000 or $100,000, enough for him to consider a significant rescue, but not enough to tempt him into outright theft. "I need your help, Mom," he pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. "Please. Just a loan. Something to get us afloat. I swear I'll pay you back." Eleanor's gaze softened, not out of forgiveness for his actions, but out of a dawning realization. Michael, in his desperation, in his ambition, was as much a victim of Savannah's schemes as she was. He was weak, easily swayed, but perhaps not inherently malicious. "Michael," she began gently, her voice calm. "Tell me something honestly. What does Savannah truly think of me? Of our family's finances?" He flinched, hesitating, then sighed, defeated. She thinks you're selfish, Mom. She says you're sitting on money Dad left you, and you should be helping us. She's always comparing you to her grandmother, who apparently helped all her family members get started." He sniffed, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "She says you just want to hoard it for yourself." Eleanor nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The phantom grandmother, the carefully constructed narrative of the selfish elderly woman. It was all part of Savannah's elaborate play. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, steady tone. "Michael, there's something your father and I kept secret. Something you were never meant to know. Until now." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your father didn't leave me $50,000 or $100,000. Arthur left me $8 million. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes wide, disbelieving. "8 million?" he stammered, the words barely escaping his lips. He blinked, shaking his head as if to clear it, unable to comprehend the staggering sum. That's impossible. We lived so modestly. Your father was a very private man," Eleanor explained, watching his face intently. "He was also incredibly astute. He wanted me to be secure, and I kept it a secret from you and Savannah, because I wanted to see how the imaginary inheritance, the one you assumed I had, was changing you. I wanted to see what you would do." As the full weight of her words settled, Michael's face transformed. The shock gave way to horror, then a sickening realization. He understood. He understood the relentless questions, the notary, the manipulative stories. He understood that his own greed, spurred by Savannah's cunning, had cost him something far more valuable than money. "Oh God." "Mom," he whispered, tears streaming down his face, not of self-pity, but of profound shame. "Oh God, what have I done?" His head fell into his hands again, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Eleanor watched him, her heart aching, yet unyielding. "You have a choice to make, Michael," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You can continue down this path with Savannah, allowing her to dictate your values and your actions, or you can decide who you want to be, and what kind of life you want to build." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, a flicker of clarity in their depths. "Savannah. She played me, didn't she? Everything, even the grandmother stories. I remember now. Her grandmother died when she was 5. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "She made it all up." "It seems she did," Eleanor confirmed quietly. Michael stood up, his newfound resolve evident even in his disheveled state. "I have to confront her. I have to. I have to figure out how to fix what I've broken. Mom." He looked at her, his gaze filled with a desperate plea. "Can you ever forgive me?" Eleanor paused, her gaze steady. "We'll see, Michael," she said, the words hanging between them, a fragile promise of a long, difficult road ahead. The phone rang at an ungodly hour, 6 a.m., 3 days after Michael's tearful confession. Eleanor's heart leaped with a familiar maternal anxiety as she answered, "Mom." Michael's voice, though weary, held a note of profound relief. "She's gone." He recounted the confrontation, a raw, painful narrative of deceit and shattered illusions. Savannah, when faced with Michael's accusations, had initially feigned innocence, then shifted to indignant fury, before finally, chillingly, admitting everything. She confessed to researching Arthur and Eleanor's finances from the very beginning, even hiring a private investigator to dig into Arthur's background. She said Arthur was a ghost. Michael choked out. That he kept everything so private, she almost gave up. But she knew there had to be something substantial. The moment Michael had revealed the $8 million figure, Savannah's whole face changed, he said. Her anger melted into a terrifyingly calculated glee. She immediately launched into a frantic plan. contest the will, claim Eleanor was mentally incompetent, and force her into a care facility, all to gain control of the assets. She started talking about lawyers and medical assessments and how easy it would be. Michael whispered, his voice filled with horror. I told her no. Michael continued, his voice firmer now. I told her I wouldn't be a part of it. I told her what I realized about her and her grandmother's stories, how she'd lied about everything. Savannah, in a fit of rage, had called him pathetic, accused him of being weak and ungrateful, and declared their marriage over. By the end of the night, she had packed her bags, filing for divorce before dawn. She had taken half their wedding gifts, cleaned out their joint savings account, and left Michael with all of their accumulated debt. Eleanor listened, a profound sense of relief washing over her, tinged with sadness for her son. Yet, she also recognized the genuine remorse in his voice, the newfound understanding that pierced through his self-pity. This was a different Michael, stripped bare of Savannah's toxic influence, finally seeing the true cost of his choices. I'm going to declare bankruptcy, Mom, Michael said, his voice resolute. Start over. Figure out who I am without her. Without all this greed. Over the next few weeks and months, Eleanor and Michael slowly, cautiously, began to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was authentic. Michael moved into a small, sparsely furnished apartment, found a job in a local hardware store, and started attending financial counseling. Every Sunday, he would visit Eleanor, not with demands or veiled questions, but with quiet conversation, helping her in the garden, or simply sharing a cup of tea. He expressed deep remorse for his actions, for allowing himself to be swayed, and for the pain he had caused. He acknowledged, with a humility Eleanor had never thought possible, that she had been protecting him all along, not just her inheritance. 3 months after Savannah's departure, Eleanor found herself gazing out the window of the big house, the home she had shared with Arthur for decades. It felt too quiet, too large, a beautiful shell that no longer fit her evolving spirit. She was ready for a new adventure. I'm going to sell the house, Michael, she announced one Sunday afternoon. Michael, surprisingly, was not upset. Really, Mom? Are you sure? When she confirmed it, a broad smile spread across his face. That's amazing. Dad always talked about you traveling, seeing the world. He always wanted that for you. They spent the afternoon reminiscing about Arthur's quiet dreams for Eleanor, the brochures he'd sometimes bring home, hinting at far-off lands. The house sold quickly to a young family, their laughter already echoing through the empty rooms as Eleanor prepared to leave. She donated most of her possessions, finding an unexpected liberation in downsizing. The vast majority of the $8 million, wisely invested by Mr. Davies, remained untouched, a secure foundation. Eleanor moved into a vibrant senior living community. Not out of necessity, but out of choice, embracing the freedom it offered. There were bridge games, art classes, and a lively social calendar. She wasn't an old person to be managed. She was a woman embarking on a new chapter. 6 months later, Michael received a postcard. On the front was a breathtaking image of whitewashed buildings clinging to a cliff face overlooking the azure Aegean Sea. On the back, in Eleanor's elegant script, it simply read, "Greetings from Santorini. It's beautiful here. Love. Mom." Eleanor, sipping a glass of local wine on her balcony overlooking the caldera, thought of Savannah. She hoped Savannah hadn't exploited another family, but she wouldn't dwell on it. Her focus was on the present and the future. Arthur's inheritance had given her not just money, but the freedom to live life on her own terms, to pursue her dreams, and most importantly, the strength and clarity to protect herself and, ultimately, guide her son back to himself. It was a legacy far richer than any sum of money.